Good. I have the terrifying assignment to moderate this session. You talked about this term, and it gives you an impression also of the heterogeneity of our group, both in Singapore and Zurich. And the issue obviously is there are differences, and at the risk of obviously if we all insist on our differences, we will never move forward. So the issue and the task is always to find the common ground and to see how flexible are we, how tolerant are we to understand the other language. And often it is a question of language, okay? And you've experienced that also in several debates where you were personally attacked for what you had said. So we would like to open the discussion and start with the audience. So any questions? So yeah, there's a question here on the second row.
Schmid, I was, as a layman, I was struck by your conclusion where you said we keep going, doing the same mistakes when you compare the different cities. In fact, you can apply the same remark to small cities of 20,000 people where the builders keep going the same mistakes. So, to your point of view, what are the reasons that this is the case? Is it an issue of communication? Is it a question of exchange between the different disciplines involved in building cities and so on?
Yeah, it is a little bit, is that...
It's on, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit the other side of this kind of abstract utopia. I mean, the point is that we very often think that we have all kinds of solutions, and we have best practice, and we could apply that, and if every city applies it, then we would have a better future. But reality is very different. Reality is very much influenced not just by these abstract possibilities and by all these wonderful proposals by experts, but it has to do with very concrete, very human elements. It has to do with power structures. It has to do with inequality. It has to do with also history. This means with socialization processes. So people are not just free. They are embedded in a long history. They are embedded in social contexts. They are embedded in power structures. They are embedded in religious kind of beliefs and structures, and so on and so forth. And so the point is that even if we think we have the solution, it does not mean that...
Christian, we have to give you a new microphone. Apparently yours is not working. Okay, keep going, go.
Okay, so if we think if some experts think they have the solution, at the end the solution has really to be implemented. It has we have to bring it to the ground, and that's a much more complex and tricky and difficult process. And I mean, my let's say preliminary conclusion out of our research is that, and that's precisely the difference between specificity and generic. If everything is generic, then all the possibilities, all the solutions could just be applied. But if we have specificity, and if that is what really, in a certain way, rules the world, then we have to really develop the solutions and the better solutions from the ground. And I'm very much convinced by that. I mean, just to give you maybe a last example, I mean, you showed one interesting photograph, and you said, yeah, we don't want that. This is the neighborhood of Nessa, and it looks terrible if you it is in Mexico City. It looks terrible if you just make this aerial view on that area. It is a wonderful area. It is very sustainable. It is very differentiated. It is not generic. It is not kind of banal. It is very differentiated. It was a very good solution, but it came out of a long history and a complicated history and a turbulent history and a contradictory history. That's the point. So we have also to understand that there are contradictions, and that the world's history develops in contradictions, and that we have to focus on that. So if we discuss solutions, we have to discuss very concrete situations, and to take care that these solutions are really also developed out of these very concrete situations. I think that's, and if we go the other way around, then we are just repeating all the errors that were done already.
Is this an answer to your question? Partially. Ludger, do you want to answer? Because the question is also directed to you. No, there was you said at points similar things, and you ended in a very pessimistic tone, and Ludger ended in a very optimistic tone.
No, I think if you're really stuck to certain parameters, to certain situations, if you trust in certain kinds of analysis and so on, you're stuck. And this independent of how careful you are and so on. And this means as soon as you're explicit with things, it's done with computers. So this, I think, is the dilemma of, and the deadlock, which is named as junk space or generic city by Koolhaas. And this does not mean that people are not engaged, not have right analytical apparatus, doing not the optimal things and so on, but this, in my strong understanding or a belief, leads to a kind of a little white, noisy environment. So, and to come out of that, we just have to change this. As I said, it's not like the others, and you do not have to fix the things. You have to dope situations, and don't try to say I don't want this, or don't want this. This is okay, but you do not have to say I want this or this is a problem and so on. Then you're always lost.
It will be interesting to hear from Dieter Lepple, who in his opening address yesterday talked about the global urbanization. And this was the message that you gave us in the beautiful Baroque space in the monastery. And you were talking about the planet and global urbanization patterns. And similarly, Ludger, you were talking about the planet as well. So, Dieter, maybe it'd be interesting to hear from you how you respond to those very different inputs that we got today.
Well, I found it very intriguing, of course. And maybe
the difference is not so big between, it seems very opposed. Christan, specificity, reinforcing specificity with the urbanization process. And Ludger saying we have this generic vision or solution. When I go back to my core activity, the labor market, there we see enormous form of specificity and always in a very, very, very unstable development. So what is clear, you can't answer to this development with specific solutions. That means you can create employment which fits to the demands. What you are doing, you turn it around. You focus, the politics have to focus not on employment, what they do with a lot of subsidies and so on, and throwing this money. No, you have to develop skills, employability. That means you have to create a generic answer to the reinforcing specificity. And actually, what I'm very interested to go on discussing with both of you. I'm very much in the line with Christian in my thinking, but I'm very intrigued what Ludger now is telling. And I would like to understand this, and maybe just a very simple idea from you overcome this very specific container of the city as a mechanical system. You're creating something like oscillating fields, and these oscillating fields are spaces of opportunities. And when you now make an intervention from the politics, you shouldn't try to orient on the specificities, for when you meet it, they're already gone again. You know, it's so dynamic that you never can the time lag of the implementation is too long really to get answers. So what you are trying to do, you answer with just to open up new capabilities and opportunities, and your idea focusing on a new concept of infrastructure. I think we have to discuss this. I think it's a crucial point. And actually what Hansjürg is doing just this, you know, to create a very intelligent form of actually a very simple idea, you know. Not make it always complicated and you know, destroying the planet by making it always complicated, but rediscover the very simplicity of energy and try to apply it, you know, on a very specific location. And so of course, you know, it sounds everything very simple and it's much more complicated, but that's the way to go, I think. So I'm very glad to be here and have learned in the last 3 hours so many things. Thank you.
Good. Since you basically made an opening to Hansjürg Leibundgut, in the break I heard a lot of conference attendants asking questions about what Hansjürg is proposing. So maybe we should take some few questions to Hansjürg. Okay, here. Hansjürg.
I think Hansjürg Leibundgut presented a kind of change in paradigm. And there are two prerequisites. The one is a change in mind of those who take decisions and populations accepting decisions or participating in the decision making. And the second is the financing of this system, because this financing is a long-term financing and is not a quick and sometimes a little bit dirty money. It is a much different element of financing. And how would you approach these two prerequisites?
Good, Hansjürg. A two-part question. First politics, then economy.
Well, I'm not an economist and not a politics, but I'm a farmer, actually. And let me tell a story that started 15 years ago. I founded a firm called AV Contracting, and we financed photovoltaic systems. And they brought together about 25 friends, and they invested 100,000 Swiss francs to grow up this company. The other 100,000 francs came from my company. I ran Amstein & Walter. And so we founded it. We merged, or we have a fusion afterwards with Edison, and this is on the market now. This does the things I would like that it is very good. So it's financing PV systems, mounted on good places in the European grid, in Mallorca, in Spain, in Italy, and so on. Bringing the electricity I need to produce my heat in winter. That's what's the idea for. But unfortunately, my friends in the board decided to go onto the market, so it's now quoted at the market, the stock market. And what happened is that this thing started, that there's a speculation on the value, and at the moment the value is about 40% of the value I paid as a person to buy the shares. So the problem is, this firm is producing good things and is earning money, but it is not quasi represented and not accepted by other people who have not the time to wait until this ground, my soil, is producing the right form of harvest. So that's why this quasi-energy, this money fails. And I have a lot of problems with my wife, because she tells me, you spend all our income and we will be poor people in the age. So now what I decide now, I try now to turn back the situation in this firm and to ask the shareholders to buy back the shares at the amount of 40-50 francs, and to conceive that we live on the yearly income, on the dividend, and not on the value that is marketed. So I don't mind having a share that has a value of 0 as long as I get 100 years 3% of interest. And that is kind of tricking out the system. So when I told this last week to a friend of mine, said, "Oh, we could establish a new kind of market, that where a fund that was only firms who guarantee, and it is transparent, that over the last 3 years there is sold a dividend for 3%, and they still survive. You have to earn money to invent things. So you have to have some money left for invention, but also to serve the capital. But it's a new kind of things, but that is out of speculation."
Okay. But this is your answer to the second question. What about the first one? Because politically you experience resistance within the system.
Yes, but the thing is, the politics always come in second hand. First, this driver is technology, or it is the will to gain money. That is even worse. So the politics they follow the ideas what is given to them from government, from administration and so on. I was member of the administration of the canton of Zurich for 4 years, and I told the government what to do. And they decided, they wrote it down to a paper, and the people could vote. So it's a question, who is the elite? Who is telling the people what could be voted? So what I try now to do is to establish a new kind of realistic technology, where the politics can say, well, we would like to have it. And first, we have to change technology and have to prove that the technology is reliable and is able to replace the old one. And only then we can accept that politics will follow. That's my experience in my last 40 years, unfortunately.
Hansjürg? Counter question. Microphone.
I think I got his message and how he would do it. I don't know whether it works, of course, I cannot know. But I don't see the political side the same as you. There must be also, in a democratic country, there must be a general will or intention to embark on something different. And this you have to create. This is, you can't just order it. You have to create it.
Yes, but the thing is,
and this is not easy, huh?
Yes, no, I know. The thing is, that's why I had to take this high risk in building up my own house. I took high risk to show that this ship is safe, so that other can embark. The embarkment, you first have to show that this ship swims. And unfortunately, that does not go with theory, you have to show it. And what I has been asked from some people in the break, can you prove it? I'm on the way to prove it, but the question is, how many times I have to prove it?
Good. Ludger, you wanted to add something?
With the economic black, I would be very relaxed on these topics. I think at the end it's an economic question. All these new technologies, this new thinking about energy, about these technologies and so on, they are cheaper at the end than any other stuff. So look at the computers and the Remington typewriter, no chance. Yeah. So we will have the same with these conventional engines and cars, and we will see the same with electric drive. Because they're cheaper, they will win. So, and the same with photovoltaics. It's a decrease of costs of the primary technology by 30% per year. It's not a question how expensive it is today. So, and the question with Hansjürg, and to prove this kind of technology is always with the first adapters, with the inventors and so on. This is always struggling around. This gives a lot of, it's a good way of living in my, to do these and struggle around with all these problems. But on a political way, I think it's finished. It will be there, and you see it with Wikipedia and the encyclopedia. You see it with MP3 and the music market, and you see the speed how mobile phones substituted the wired phones and so on. It will be faster than you expect because it's cheap. And therefore, in politics, I think you have to go a step back and say, okay, we have to engage people in developing skills. This is the kind of experiments, the kind of research. But in politics, you have just to make environments that this is not flooding away our cultural qualities.
We are working in two very interesting research environments. One is at the ETH Zurich with a very close connection to the government. It's one of the small countries that has access to the government. And similarly, Gerhard, we're operating in Singapore, also in a small country with a close connection to the government. Could you say maybe something about this relationship between research and politics from your experience? And he needs the microphone.
Coming to Switzerland, that was one of the most surprising things, that there's such a close connection between a research institution like the ETH system and the government, even formulated from the very beginning of the university. And that seems to be very fruitful and working quite well. In Singapore, I think it's a different story because there's a big filter in between, and we take great care that we do not connect directly with the government, because it's the National Research Foundation in between. So it's more like it would be with the Swiss Science Foundation, the relation that we have in Singapore. Of course, the interest from the government is very great, but more the interest of the so-called agencies, which would be like the ministries or the urban planning agencies in Switzerland. So there's more filters, I would say, between our operation in Singapore and the researchers than it is here between the government directly and ETH Zurich.
Okay. Further questions? Yeah. Stephen?
Thank you. Thanks for a super interesting session. And it struck, in a way, this is an observation, but it's also a question to Hansjürg and to Ludger. But the obvious question is that Ludger, in a way, sets a scene for a generic condition whereby, which originally in Koolhaas's essay really is a cultural observation. It's the culture of building which is genericizing, and it's a contribution to the discussion about globalization. In a way, you take it into the generic technologies which drive future urbanization. And I think that's a very interesting and provocative kind of line. The obvious way to link it to Hansjürg, his work, is that his work clearly demonstrates a technology which is not genericizing. In fact, it's precisely located and rooted in a particular location. So my question first to Hansjürg, in a way, is I think it's implicit already in your work, but I'd be interested to know. You proposed two very beautiful diagrams. One was the 15-hour solar diagram around the world, which I thought was a stunning demonstration of Ludger's generic but different So it's generic but different. And I want to come back to Ludger on this. The other one is that is the loop diagram into the Earth, which again the implicit part of that was missing. So it's clearly a local technology, because I'm thinking from a tropical condition, the last thing you want to do is extract 5 or 10 degrees from the ground, where in fact what you're trying to do is dissipate heat. It's not just to find heat. So I know that your colleagues are working on an inverted kind of exergy sort of problem. So I'm to come back. So that would be the first. The question would be what would be that technological kind of view in another location. And I think what's interesting about that is that I think it poses a challenge to Ludger's, or at least a demand on Ludger to specify the generic, because I think where this is going is the idea of a generic, but a kind of differentiation within a generic framework. And I think, finally, I think that comes to Christian's project, that there are multiple pathways, and we have to be attuned and look for and extract differences from within a kind of generic condition. So it's a modification. So Hansjürg, would you be able to first of all talk about the flip side to the Earth loop, and to Ludger, does that change and does it modify your definition of the generic?
And then to Christian, whether he really sees himself as a relay between the two.
Well, I think the breakthrough in the theory of the system I propose now is when we went to Singapore. Because here it is quite obvious that we have a storage problem in our climate condition, because it's an oscillating sun, and this moving of the Earth around the sun and the inclination of the Earth and turning around gives us these seasons, and that's why we have to store things. Then we came to Singapore, and first I asked, look for colder spaces where we can get rid of the energy all over the day, and we didn't find it. Because the ground was too hot, the sea was too hot, and the sea that has a possibility is too far away. We know that in open sea we find spots at 4 degrees centigrade, but in Singapore they are too far away. We found it in somewhere in Morocco, that is easy. We also found it in Oman, but not in Singapore. So we had to redo the theory, because if a theory cannot explain a system in a point, it is no theory. So we have to explain the singularity of this bloody change of changing the exergy, the part of, because it's changing the quality of energy if it comes from cold to heat, and it is dependent on the temperature. And that's why we found a new way of interpreting the oscillating system of houses. And from there on, it was easy to look on storage systems as a capacity in electrical oscillating system. And we found that the ground is a perfect thing, so we have just to find the environment where this oscillating system is situated best. And now we can show, if you go from Zurich to Milano, this point in the Earth is on a different level of depth. And if you go to Sicily, it is no need to dig down, because the oscillating is just here. You don't need the soil as a storage system. The oscillating is the environment, the air. Yeah. And if you go further to Singapore, you have a problem, because there is no sink, no heat sink. So we have to force the energy all time out. But the thing is, why is it so hot and so humid in Singapore? Because there's so much sun. So we use the sun to force it all the time out. No problem. Just we have to overcome the oscillation of these 12 hours from night to day. And there's a question of different oscillating systems with different frequencies and different amplitudes. And that is, let's say, that's a question of electrotechnology. It's the same thing like we did with the flow of heat. but it's a little bit more complicated, but it corresponds directly to this, what Ludger is telling now. So it's oscillating, and if you look at the places where we can benefit of different oscillations, then you can just look on the map, and if you have a connection, have a possibility to transport energy, okay, but don't try to transport heat over 12,000 kilometers. That's silly.
Good, Ludger.
Yeah, in my perspective...
microphone, please.
In my hello. Yeah, in my perspective...
Sorry, is the microphone working? Yeah?
No, not really.
Not really? Now?
Hello? Now it's working.
It's working, great.
So in my perspective, that you are able to do these things and you're able to discuss different areas on our planet in this way is the generic infrastructure we have. Of course we have to do that, all this stuff. But this is a generic thing. And this is what we learned to cultivate in the last 100 years. So to urbanize or to cultivate this global urbanization. I would say that we are able to discuss systems in abstraction from the actual place. Means that we are cultivating urbanity, which implies that we have to do it, of course, somewhere in a reasonable, in an optimized way. But for me, the key question of politics and economy is how to cultivate these principal potentials. And these are the questions then of how to finance these things and what should be the politics and the focus of politics and so on. So I would turn it in this way.
Christian.
Well, I mean, these kind of reflections, what is interesting with those is that they open up certain horizons. I mean, that's the quality. To say the problem as it is discussed is in a certain way an ill-defined problem. It's in a wrong. It's the wrong question, and I think that's the similarities of both approaches. So to say the point is not that we have to have a kind of zero energy house, but the point is that we have to have zero carbon emission. That's the point. So to really come to the main problem and to ask the right questions. And I mean, in this direction, that's something that I see in a similar way. So if we have an abundance of energy, is wonderful. And then this solves us a lot of problems. And if it's possible to implement these kind of systems, I mean, great. So that's, I think, on that level, I don't see disagreement.
Where do you see disagreement?
A disagreement I see in the point then on the effects that these have. Because the effects are not, in many cases, the effects are not just rational. So irrationality is a key feature in our world, and it will always be. So what I see there is, I mean, tradition, for instance, is something quite irrational. The gods of your cities, they are quite irrational, and that's a part of our cities. We have to live with that. We have to accept that, and we have also to take it into consideration.
Okay.
And so that's for me then the point. If we come down, and it might even be possible that we come to a concrete situation and we say, come on, we have wonderful solutions. And then we see the situation that maybe the responsibles, they don't listen to us. They don't, or maybe they listen to us, but they don't act in the same way. Because maybe the agenda is something else.
Okay. Gerhard.
I was getting a bit worried about the abstraction of the discussion, referring it back to the discussion we had last night with the population. But I think there's a very strong connection, and the power of these abstract concepts is really fantastic. Bringing it back to Engelberg, I don't know where these photovoltaic and water collector, the combined things, are produced. But when I see just looking at this principle and then receiving delegations from Japan, from very highly quoted research operation like Riken, who have somehow heard that at the ETH Science City we are building this Earth Register and dynamic Earth storage, want to see that system, being able to show that to them, and they suddenly understand how that works and know it could work in their climate zone as well. And these things could even be produced, let's say in Engelberg or in Einsiedeln or in another place. That shows immediately the direct link of these principles to the situation here. And I think that is also one of the main tasks of the ETH, of course, to establish this link. So I just wanted to make sure we don't lose the sight that although it might sound very, very abstract, it becomes very quickly very concrete if we go into the local capabilities, for example, here in Switzerland, also as gigantic export possibilities, of course.
Great. So if I understand you correctly, this was not a question but an observation. Are there any questions along these trajectories with a call, if I understood you correctly, to move from the abstract to the concrete? Yes.
My question.
Could you introduce yourself, please, first?
No, my name is Christan. I'm a physicist by basic training.
The microphone is not working.
We'll have to do something here.
You're getting a new one? Technology, yeah.
My name is Christan. I'm basic training is in physics. I was in applied optics, and I used to be for 6 years president of the Swiss Academy of Engineering Sciences.
Okay.
So Hansjürg, we know each other quite well. I have a few, perhaps a little bit detailed questions to what you said. The key word you said just a few minutes ago, go where you can really get your son, and you limited yourself in your answer here to Europe. You have just to go to Spain, for instance, to get then your photovoltaic, the electrical energy. It's rather power than energy, electrically, and feed it to the grid. Now, I think grid is really the key word. Grid, you mentioned it also, how to bring over long distances. We have this high voltage direct current, DC current transmission nowadays for that solution. But now I come to the point, well, why would you produce all over photovoltaics and not what you have shown there in the World Exhibition, making by concentrated solar energy, steam, and then mechanical electrical power. Okay. That is rather technical, it's a detail. The other point is, we do have the problem, I think, just goes also to the investment. We have the producers of the electrical energy or power. They do not produce energy, they have to produce power, energy they can't store. That's one of the basic things. So we have the wind parks, we have the solars, we have whatsoever. And we have, on the other hand, those who would like to buy it. And in between we have this grid. And who is actually owns the grid? How can the owner of the grid, which is very expensive and gets even more and more expensive by the complexity, by the long distances, by the flexibility, by the smartness, so to say, how can those who finance that earn money of it? If you take car, you have car makers, but the car maker does not sell his product directly to the individuals. You have in between, you have a distribution system which can, with its marketing structure and so on, and the storage capacity, earn money finally. The distributor earns the money. The producer, it's much more difficult, and the consumer tries to get a rebate or a little price. Now, how is that with the future of the electrical power system? How do you think? Is there a basic economical thinking which has to be changed?
Okay, a two-part question again.
Incentive, more incentive.
Well, actually,
invest in the grid.
Well, actually, I don't know. I haven't imagined. I could imagine a situation where somebody is running a grid, and he has to pay to the common because he's using common space. You have to install transport lines, cables or whatever, or the ground, and you install a grid, and you get this ground, this possibility from the common community, and you pay the community a rent, annual rent, and you get money from the distributor to transport electricity through a grid. That is now common in Switzerland. We divided the system of producers and the grid and the end distributor into 3 systems. So that is guaranteed at the moment, and as soon as you have open access from everybody to any producer, the grid has to transport it, and he is able to, the grid owner is able to ask for an amount of money to transport this. So that would be okay. The problem is the storing of energy, the storing of electricity. Electricity can be stored in condensators as a load in electrons, but we would have to have a huge amount of material, so we have to convert this electricity into another kind of energy that could chemical energy or potential energy and so on. The important, interesting thing is if we invent this new line of Eurasian power line, then we have to store it only on a very short range of time. That means we have to store energy, so electricity, between 5 and 10 hours a day. And every day, if we have to over-install a capacity on the whole system of producing energy out of photovoltaics, water power, and wind energy into this grid, and we have to overproduce it by about 30% we calculated. So the question is, if we want to cover the load, the electrical load on the worst day in the year, that is somewhere in winter where the industry is in full production and the heat load is the biggest for the heat pumps. So we have to balance it from the power of these days. That means that we have overproduction of energy on the electricity in summer. But then we use the technology, what Ludger is telling us, this production of storable form of energy in gas or in methanol or whatever, and producing a storable form of energy that can be reconverted in electricity. So we know everything, but the question is, who is willing to introduce this into the new system that will take 40 years, 30, 40 years. And fortunately, we have good young engineers, and we have hopefully good economics that together can show that this system is first affordable, and second cheaper, and third has a less risks than any other system for the whole society. And I think that is the point. If we can get rid of this kind of thinking individual for each country and can overcome the borders of the countries and help each other to sell and produce electricity and distribute it, then it will be paradise. And I always tell the people how Engelberg could survive without the tourists from Japan. How can we survive without electricity from Mongolia? Good, Ludger.
In my perspective,
microphone, please.
In my perspective, and in the scheme I showed, it's very clear that the distribution of energy is a political thing. If you put it to economy, then you just amplify the existing hierarchical structures. So the big buildings get bigger. So I think it's very important that we see infrastructures as the generic political thing. Therefore, the discussions with Occupy, with pirates and so on, they're very, very important. It's the same with electrical grid. The electrical grid is the political thing. The storage is economy. So this is with your household. So you can make money with that and so on if the grid is working. So and I think it's very important that if you want to make politics, these are the strategic, generic impacts you can have to the country.
Okay.
And the symptom that in Switzerland it's this distributed extremely well equipped all over the country, all over the 20th century is a very clear symptom for a strong political society. So this is
good.
My notion to that.
We have time for one more question, Dirk.
It's not more a question, but it's more kind of following up. I mean, when we understand, but we have to go the full way. So I think the definition for the political realm, what you just said, is exactly not creating the grid as a physical system, but basically making the decision that as an abstract breeding ground, personal investment, as you say, the individual can start to use that as a tool. I give an example, and to follow up. The German government some years ago made a decision that as people start to feed in electricity harvested on their roof, is basically reimbursed with a certain amount of money to give some stable system for over several years. But it was forgotten exactly the point that that energy produced now by individuals and not anymore by a nation state had to be transported, in the case of Germany, from the northern coast mostly, from wind energy and so on, to the southern part. So what is happening right now is that even so the political will was there, that in a second step, that this will was not thought the whole way through and how to transport the energy as well. So what is needed again is an abstraction of the idea that the national grid is not owned anymore as a physical structure by the state, but is owned as an abstract instrument of how to enable individuals, and that might be a person, a family, a city, a community, to enable to start investing into a new networked idea. And I think that is
Christian, I had a sense that you would respond, so please.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because it means that you always also need social innovations, and I mean, I think the point is that we have, if you are thinking about technical innovations, we have also to think about social innovations. And I mean, I'm not a specialist in this field, but coming back to urbanization processes, at the moment I'm looking at urbanization processes as a kind of constant innovation process. So urbanization is a process of innovation, and from different ingredients and from different kind of histories and pathways, there are also always different kind of solutions that are developed. And if you take that serious, I think then we have much more, let's say, future-oriented kind of ways that we can act. So that we are more open into different, let's say, the range of possible answers to this materialization of all these processes is much wider than we normally think. And we have to accept that, and not only to accept it, but to see it also as an asset, as a chance, as a possibility. I think that's the point. So that we have to think technical innovations always also together with social innovations. And I think that could be a key moment. But this kind of social innovations are usually, and that's what I try to show with the urbanization process, are usually relatively local. They are relatively specific. But that's, again, is an asset, is an advantage, because this gives us a much broader, let's say, range of possible answers and possible solutions. And that's precisely what we have to look at.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to hear that we are talking about socio-technical problem, and this maybe explains why you are sitting between Hansjürg and Ludger. So with this, I would like to express my greatest gratitude to our speakers as well as to the audience. So a big applause for you, and please collect the presents.